well, I've polled the group. I think most of y'all think it's cold. I thought it was fabulous. But on this beautiful morning the Lord's given us. Marty, would you mind to lead us in a word of prayer? By my remembrance, we left off in about verse 5 of Matthew chapter 8. And we will pick up there in just a moment. I know there are a lot of folks that are sick that are out this morning, and I know Paisley joined them last night at about 2 o'clock in the morning. She ran into the bedroom and had an obvious fever. So I appreciate your prayers, and I know we'll probably have people in and out for the next couple months with different variations of the sickness. So, but thankfully we get to read about the great physician this morning. And let's begin in Matthew chapter 8 and verse 5. When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly." And he said to him, "I will come heal him." But the centurion replied, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only to say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, and with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes. And to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you as you have believed." And the servant was healed at that very moment. What sticks out to us here? This is there's a lot of things going on right here that are quite amazing. This is almost a microcosm of everything else. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, it's one of the two examples of one having great faith, knowing that he didn't have to be there to make it happen. He could just say a word and it would happen.
Yeah, this man recognizes the true power that Jesus had. He recognizes a little more than it seems everybody else has yet to this point. Go ahead, Chuck.
This is where Jesus invented working remote. You don't have to be there. You can do it remote. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, so Jesus wrote working remotely. But we, oh, Chuck, go ahead.
Well, the other thing too, we see these centurions, in the Bible are always painted as such rational, thinkers. Here we've got a centurion having that kind of faith. It's just continuing. Just keep seeing these guys. It's just a fact.
Yeah, once upon a time in the world, there was a time when men were elevated to stations of power and authority based on abilities instead of, who they knew or how much money they had. No, I don't know that for certain. I'm just teasing. But, yeah, we do have a lot of very wise centurions. And, part of that, it certainly does come from that leadership role. He mentions that in what he says to Jesus. He knows that if he tells one of his men to do literally anything, they're going to do it, not just because they're bound by Roman law, which they were, but because they trusted him. Well, that statement and what he's saying there, he is saying that he recognizes and knows that all of the elements of this world are under his control at a word. Say it, it'll happen. So this faith, he has very much the same faith that we have when we read and believe in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. He knew that Jesus could speak it into reality. And then it says Jesus marveled. What's it mean to marvel at something? We're going to see that word quite a few times. But how did a man surprise God? Yeah. But Jesus deemed it remarkable. Go ahead, Chris.
It's kind of like when Stephen said what he said, and then before he was stoned, he said the same thing Jesus said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then Jesus was standing up, like, way to go. He's like, you're somebody, special because you're willing to die, the Holy Spirit was talking through him and said what he said, and it was another way, I think, that he marveled.
Yeah, this is not a good example, but it's the best one I got. I have Paisley, of course, and most of y'all have children. You know what your kids know, but when they really get it right, you just kind of, oh man, you're just thrilled about it. When you hear that they've done something and you're just so overwhelmingly proud. That on a divine level. That's the best I can think that I can compare this moment to. Because this is truly amazing. Because what he says next, he says, many will come from the east and the west. What's that mean? Any ideas? What you say, Dwayne? Oh, no. It means the whole world, east and west. Everybody from everywhere. Many are going to come to the kingdom of heaven and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So yeah, Gentiles, but not just Gentiles. There's going to be anybody and everybody are going to be welcome. But the sons of the kingdom, the people that feel that they're entitled to this inheritance, the people that were originally in the tree, we think Romans 11, they're going to be cast aside. And it's going to be because of their lack of faith. It's going to be because of their self-made righteousness. It's going to be because of they don't have this attitude that this centurion has. And then go and let it be done as you have believed. we're going to hear Jesus talk about faith and preach about faith, and that's all throughout the Gospels. Paul talks about it. You know, the limiting factor of what God does for people is often based on our faith. Our faith is a limiting factor because he could do everything like that. What else? Does anybody see anything else?
Just the fact that verse 12 indicates the Jews aren't going to be given special treatment. It's growing today. We just continually hear the Jews, there's a special time coming when the Jews are going to reform in Palestine. All the Jews are going to be saved. It's not in the Bible. That's not scripture.
Yeah, there's...
In the kingdom they will, in the kingdom of Christ, in his kingdom, but not physically.
Yeah, it's difficult, to not think about those things with everything that's going on in the world right now. And as we study through Matthew and as we've studied through especially the book of Romans recently and looking at all those things that are laid out in Scripture, there are a lot of people that think that piece of ground over there is somehow sacred and tied to something that we need to be motivated to protect. And I can't find that in Scripture anywhere. If you can and you want to talk about it, let's by all means do. But I just cannot find that anywhere. All right, go ahead, Chuck.
In Jeremiah 7 and verse 31, the people were doing something that God never imagined that they would do. They were sacrificing their kids. But, God never even thought that they would stoop that low. It never entered his mind. It did not come into my mind is the way that New American phrases it. So, we can be bad.
Yeah.
We can be good, we can be bad.
And verses like that, in this passage here where Jesus marvels in things, we understand that God is omniscient and omnipresent and, that he is all-knowing and all-seeing and all these things. When we go to trying to figure out what God chooses to know at every present, we're talking nonsense because we don't know. So let's, if there's nothing else, let's step on to verse 14. Verse 14. And when Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick with a fever. He touched her with his hand, and the fever left her, and she rose and began to serve him. That evening they brought him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken of by the prophet Isaiah. He took all our illnesses and bore all our diseases. Where's that prophecy at? Yes, sir. So most of us could probably quote a few verses of Isaiah 53. A few of us could probably do a whole lot better than me. But this is one of those passages that we see this here, and I was trying to think of a good metaphor to kind of get everybody in the spirit of it. When we see this, it should tell us what's coming next. Kind of if you have say you got a Cajun friend, and you come over to their house and they're grabbing a stick of butter and a bag of flour, you should probably assume you're fixing to have something tasty, because they're fixing to make a roux, right? Well, here we have Jesus, and he is taking away sins. He is healing the sick. He is casting out demons. He is despised and forsaken, acquainted with grief. And one like him whom men hide their face. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely our griefs he bore himself, and our sorrows he carried. Yet we ourselves esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. Of course, we know that he was pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. That's what's coming next. Jesus is taking and healing these things, and it is evidence of things to come. What else sticks out to us here? Or do you have any thoughts? It doesn't have to be something just in particular sticks out to you, I guess.
Just the casting out of devils pops right out at me. This is a time when, in this apostolic period where it's important for God's people that are preaching his word, be able to demonstrate the power of the supernatural.
Absolutely. And we see quite a few instances of this, and we'll see another one probably this morning. Jesus had absolute power over these things. It was, and as we'll read toward the end of chapter 8, just the immense power that and evil that was sometimes displayed in these instances. And Jesus just said, get out. Like, instant. Go ahead, Chris.
I just think also it's just the fulfillment of things. He came to fulfill the law and the prophets. He did
Very much so.
everything he did from his life to death. He fulfilled.
That is, and that is very much this whole section of Matthew that we've been looking at all the way until about chapter 16, when things kind of start to change toward the sour a little bit more as far as the Jewish leadership goes. I mean, this is Jesus presenting the kingdom. He is showing that he is legitimate, that he has the power of God, and he is giving this message that is changing the dynamic of what they're supposed to be thinking and doing. And certainly, I mean, and there's so few words used here, but think about these people that have been sick their whole life. I mean, the previous one, where it says paralyzed, that's palsy. It could mean, kind of like when we talked about leprosy last class, it can mean any number of different things. He could have had, MS. He could have had ALS. He could have had, just a neurological condition. We could name a million things. And Jesus wasn't even there and said, yeah, as you said. And the guy got up. The guy was up and well before the centurion got home.
Before, when the leper said, hey, if you're willing, you cleanse me, he said, I am willing.
Yeah. And here, Peter's mother-in-law is sick with a fever. A fever is about as nondescript as it gets. But, I know most homemakers, when they're sick, they're still running around taking care of everybody else. So we know, just based on human behavior and how things work, she was bad off. I think about my mother-in-law, and I know the last time we were, and if she watches this, she's going to be mad at me for telling anybody she had anything wrong with her. She had a great big cyst thing on the back of her knee that was all womped up. She couldn't walk. She made herself. She couldn't. She was taking care of everybody else, taking care of the kid. So I think just because we know enough about human behavior, she was sick. And Jesus, get up. She's better. That is beyond we can understand what happened. And we can have faith and know that it did, but just to see it, that's amazing. To have that power. Anything else here? All right, let's move on to 18 through 22. Now, when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to go to the other side. And a scribe came up and said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Another of the disciples said to him, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." And Jesus said to him, "Follow me and leave the dead to bury their dead, their own dead." What sticks out to us here? I know these are kind of funny sayings, aren't they? So foxes have holes, birds have of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What all is Jesus saying with that sentence?
One, he could have been a king. They tried to make him a king many times, but that wasn't what was to occur. That was pure prophecy. So he's just telling them here, I live a very simple life. Be careful what you ask for.
He's, first of all, he said, "Yeah, I don't have a home here," and the implication of that is very much he's not focused on any kind of an earthly kingdom. What we were just talking about with that piece of ground over there, he has no interest in that piece of earth. It's going to get burned up with everything else. Go ahead, Chris.
And that was what I was about to say, was that his home is not here, just like our home isn't here. We're just passing through, like the song we sing all the time. And also, I think the whole meaning of it was, the cost of discipleship. There's no time to turn back and just follow me.
Yeah, there's, and there's, you jump down to verse 21 and 22. There's maybe some wiggle room there. Maybe his dad wasn't dead yet, is kind of the way most scholars tend to look at that. But either way, whether he was, in his later years, will die soon, whether he was on his deathbed, or whether he was just died, what good would him delaying following Jesus do? Go ahead.
The time is now. I think that's the parallel. A lot of these things go beyond, like we were just saying with the other point. They go beyond the here and now. What are we getting out of that? Well, yeah, you've got parents that are. I think when it's saying I've got to bury my parents, I'm taking care of them. I think that's what I've always heard. I've got a responsibility for them right now. I can't follow you. And he said, no, the time is now to follow me.
Yeah, there's, Jesus' entire adult ministry was very short. He wasn't, he did not continue this pattern for a very long time because of just how much it stirred up. This is what, 3 years, 2 or 3 years? Not very long before they crucified him. Because he was such an agent of change. Bottom line, when it comes to following Christ, there is no delay, there is no excuse that should cause us to want to delay. It doesn't matter whether it is family, it doesn't matter whether it is our earthly situation in money or lodging or whatever. And quite frankly, as we see, as the church is established, Jesus very much has established a pattern for if those are your problems, they'll be aided and absorbed into the church. They'll be helped and aided by the body. So he had a plan. He was not going to leave you without. But very much, we're not supposed to be people of this world focused on worldly things. Anything else? I promise I won't lead the song melody. All right, as we go to Jesus calming the storm. I'm just teasing you. Y'all know I always want an excuse to lead Master, the Tempest is Raging. But let's go ahead and read these verses here. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waters, but he was asleep. And when they went and awoke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" And then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and seas obey him?" You probably would like to put in your notes the parallels in the other Gospels to this account are in Luke chapter 8 and Mark chapter 4. And another thing, if you've been maybe jumping around looking for parallels and things, this event likely occurs after what Matthew gives us account of in chapter 13. So Matthew is not a purely chronological account that everything happened just this after this after this. And we can establish that from looking at Luke's account very much so. But all that aside, what sticks out to us in this story?
So just as he shows us he has the power of the supernatural, he's showing us that he has the power of the physical elements.
Yeah, there is nothing that is in this world that he does not have absolute and immediate control over. Nothing. And the disciples, what can we imply from the disciples' reaction here? You know, Jesus says, "Oh, you of little faith," but what do we draw from that? They knew he was special. They knew he had some power. Do you think they really, truly appreciated who Jesus was in his entirety yet? No. I don't know if they really completely got it until the day of Pentecost. They knew everything was just, they knew he was special. They knew and they believed and they had faith. And then on the day of Pentecost, any doubt that they might have had was removed. You know, because then the Helper had come. You know, so, yeah, they were loyal, but they just didn't quite get it yet. So, what should our response be? How should we take this kind of a message, and how should we apply it in our lives? Go ahead, Dwayne.
We're serving the real God. And we know that no matter life or death or whatever happens in our life, that it's kind of like what you said a couple of weeks ago, that no matter what, we're going to be covered. You know, whether we die of cancer or whatever it is, there's no reason to get all up in arms about it because we know we're appointed to die once. But as long as you have your sins covered by Jesus, what's the worry?
Yeah. All right.
I think John sums it up too. John 20:30 it says, "And many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that ye might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, that believing ye might have life through his name." So these things were done not only
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Billy.
Building upon what they're saying, and they said it in a certain way, but everything Jesus does, all of his miracles, everything he does physically only proves he can do it spiritually also. Anything he says, he can hear a leper, he can tell spots, things like that. It just goes right along with, I proved that I can do it this way, I can do it this way.
Yes, very much. Jesus has established his power over all things. There's one more lesson, and maybe I'm stretching here, but I don't feel like I am. But y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. We're gonna encounter people that are at different levels of faith. And there are gonna be people that struggle with things, and those instances where somebody has cancer, somebody's had a car accident, somebody's had something traumatic happen, they're going to be shaken. Our response, we're not the one of authority that can come at somebody, oh, you have little faith. This was Jesus' ultimate authority. He was the authority. When we see someone struggling in their faith, our response should be a different one. What do y'all think our response should be? Compassion. I heard pray. Is that what I heard? To pray for them. We should come at them with grace and mercy and compassion. We shouldn't indulge wrong thinking, but we should admonish and build up and encourage and edify and educate. So it's important that we keep that attitude and never build ourselves up to where we think, oh, they just don't have faith. You don't know what they have. Jesus could look straight through somebody and know exactly. You can't do that. Believe me, I can read human body language and behavior better than most, but I don't know what everybody's thinking. I ain't going to try to pretend to. So, just kind of an implication that I felt like was important. Anything else before we move on to 28 through the end of the chapter? All right, let's go. And when he came to the other side, to the country of, Gadareans, 2 demon-possessed men met him coming out of the tombs, so fierce that no one could pass that way. And behold, they cried out, "What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a herd of many pigs was feeding at some distance from them, and the demons begged him, saying, "If you cast us out, send us away into the herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank and into the sea and drowned in the waters. The herdsmen fled, and going into the city, they told everything, especially what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. This is also present in Luke chapter 8 and Mark chapter 5. But what things stick out to us here in Matthew? The demons see Jesus and they say, "What have you come to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Of course, we know that they know Jesus and they recognize Jesus, and hearing them say that should have absolutely, everybody that should have been with Jesus should have been like, wow. But go ahead, Chris.
They know that their judgment, they know it's coming. It may not be tomorrow, but it is coming. And it's funny how in Luke, you just tell them one man.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew says two.
Yeah, I've wondered about that, and I've looked at, after I went through it, I went and looked at some smart people. And best I can tell, perhaps one of the men was significantly worse off than the other one, and maybe that's why Luke and Mark's account only talks about the one. It's not impossible that there's different accounts of very similar things happening in different places. And these are similar enough. I don't think that's the case, but this stuff happened 2,000 years ago, and of course Dwayne read from John that Jesus did so many things. If they gave an account of all the miracles and all the miraculous things that he did, the world couldn't contain the whole of it. So, there's a lot here, but what you said, when they say, torment us before the time, in Luke 8:31, they say, not to go to the abyss. We read about this abyss in a couple of other places in the New Testament. In 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4, he says that there's chains of gloomy darkness for them until judgment. And of course, that's also in Jude verse 6. So yeah, they knew what their lot was to come.
Didn't it say in Isaiah 14:12, when they was kicked out of heaven, and this is what the world was formed, that they were thrown into outer darkness, and when they landed, the chains followed them and chained them up. And some, I don't know if that's true or not, but some say that they're under the Euphrates River.
Apocalyptic and figurative language is, and I'm going into the opinion of Ryan and not anything else. When people get really sure that they know exactly what something that is in that apocalyptic poetry style means, I get real skeptical. There are certain things that were written in those apocalyptic prophecies, and we have the book of Daniel, and we have Revelation and things, to where we can go from history and say, yeah, that's pretty obvious right there where that is. As far as being held in a physical place in this world, I don't think that we have sufficient evidence to make that claim. But based on our other studies, and especially the study of Ephesians that we had, we know of there is this physical realm that we live in, and then there is that realm beyond. The one that there are things going on that we don't see, but we know that our accomplishments are rejoiced in it, and our failings are mourned in it.
It is consistent with what we believe, that we're in the last days. There is, Matthew 25 is going to occur at the end of these last days.
Yeah.
There's only going to be one, and I think that's kind of significant when it says the time. It definitely is the time. Because we've got people running around telling that there's all these other times. You draw out on a timeline some of these things that people are teaching. They're calling for multiple times. It's only one time. This devil knows it.
Yeah. The word is in itself not as complicated as we make it as people. And a good rule of thumb is, if you read something and you think that it changes what literally everything else you've ever read that is in just very plain, easy to understand words, it changes the meaning of it, take a breath, step back, and study it again. And that's why, I know there's nothing wrong with topical studies, but for me and in my personal life and growth in these past few years, studying things in its context, it's so important. Because when you read some of those things that don't necessarily make sense when you read 6 verses at a time, but then if you read the whole chapter around it, it makes a whole lot of sense. And especially with the Old Testament, if you were to just grab verses out of Hosea and not look at everything around it, you're going to be so confused. Same thing with most of the prophets. And so context is absolutely important. So then they ask him to cast him into pigs. Okay. Which is kind of odd. But so why do the pigs run off into the ocean? This is purely speculative. We don't have, I don't have a good answer. But why?
I think it's just a characteristic of the demon. It said that they ran violently to the river, and I don't know, maybe it's a characteristic, but it did say that before they drowned, that the demons came out of them.
Does it say, where does it say that at?
I thought I read that the demon came out of them.
Let me check the other accounts. I'm not going to say no, but all people. Don't see it in Luke. And I entered, rushed down. No, I don't see that in any of the accounts. The reason I ask that is it's kind of funny because here they didn't want to go to judgment, right? They didn't want to go to the abyss. So they said, put us in the pigs. Well, and then they died anyway. So, we could speculate as to why did they, did the demons going into the pigs drive all the pigs mad, and did they rush? Did the noise of whatever happening spook a portion of the pigs, and then, being dumb animals, they all kind of bum rushed, and here the demons possessed pigs are trying to get out of the way, and they just get pushed over the cliff because they're all freaked out. I don't know. But Jesus gave them exactly what they wanted, and they received their reward. Is kind of the what happened. But then here, the herdsmen, they go into the town, and then everybody comes out, and what do? Please leave. Obviously they would have been unable to deny that something miraculous had occurred. They might have had some faith at that point. They might have just not been. Go ahead, Billy.
Like you said, it's purely speculation. It's not something, it would have been funny to have the idea that a pig would rather be dead than to be possessed. When a human would rather be possessed than be dead, it's kind of weird that way. It would apply that way, but that's speculation, like you said.
Yeah.
And I think they wanted Jesus gone because he done cost a lot of money.
Yeah, that's this would have been a Gentile region, of course, so they wouldn't have had any problem eating that bacon. And that's a couple thousand pigs. Woo! I don't know how much a pig was worth back then, but I know now. I mean, even if they're pretty crummy pigs, you're looking at a couple $100 a piece. So very much a very large expense loss. All right, so we'll do chapter 9 on Wednesday, hopefully, and then next Sunday, assuming that I'm not unwell and my girls are better, Chris will cover class. Chris Benson will cover class. I didn't want you to think I was springing it on you. But